وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. صلوا على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So 2 weeks ago, Thursday night we didn't have the dars, I believe, because we did Jama' because it was cold. But I did cover that dars on Saturday, so I'm just going to review it for those that didn't attend. Last time we spoke about how the Prophet ﷺ sat. Okay, this is just a review for those. Can you move this so the people can see? The Prophet ﷺ, this is a review for those that didn't attend. He used to sit like this, ahyanan, like this. And this is called qurfusa. Qurfusa or ihtiba. This sitting is how the Prophet ﷺ would sometimes sit like this. And the Prophet ﷺ was once seen in the masjid, he was resting ﷺ. And I feel bad doing this because everyone's looking at me, but just this is min bab al-ta'aleem and not because I'm trying to disrespect anybody by lying down. But just to show you guys, if I lie down like this is called istilqa. The Prophet ﷺ, he was once lying down in the masjid and one of the companions saw him lying down as such. It's called istilqa. And there's a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ, he actually says, لا يستلقين أحدكم. And what that is referring to, as Imam al-Nawawi mentions, that the illah behind it, the reasoning behind it is because back in the day they didn't have pants and long garments. They wore izar and rida. And we all know, anybody who went to Hajj, that if uncles, they like to lie down too relaxed, they might show something that nobody wants to see. And so if a person lies down in the masjid and he's wearing, the people back, you know how they wear like a towel? You're going to see things that shouldn't be seen in the masjid or in general. But if you're wearing this, it should be fine. It's about the awra. Okay, so today we're covering باب ما جاء في تكأة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. تكأة على وزن لمزة. على وزن لمزة. تكأة. And the bab after it, the chapter after it is ittika. So tuka'ah, so Imam al-Tirmidhi, he made it into 2 chapters. Tuka'ah is when the Prophet ﷺ would recline upon a cushion, for example, a wisada of some sort. And ittika is when he would be on one of his companions, whether it was because he was sick or for another reason. So the chapter we're covering today is when the Prophet ﷺ would be seen reclining on a cushion of some sort. You know how you recline on a cushion when you're at home, when you're in those kinds of gatherings when there's pillows around. The Prophet ﷺ was seen doing such, and there's only a few ahadith in the chapter, so we'll cover them inshallah. عن جابر بن سمرة قال رأيت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم متكئا على وسادة على يساره. This companion Jabir, he saw the Prophet ﷺ reclining on a cushion that was on his left side. Does that mean that whenever you recline on a cushion, it should be your left side out of sunnah? No. The Prophet ﷺ just so happened to have the cushion on his left side, so he was reclining on it. But it's not left side or right side. They say that, the good things you should do on your right side and the bad things you should do with your left. But when it comes to reclining, it's wherever the pillow is. It's not left or right. You could do it on either side and it's totally fine. And remember, the reason we're covering this is sometimes people think that these sort of things are aib. Sometimes people culturally, if you're seen leaning on something, they'll be like, well, look at this guy, he has no respect for the majlis. The Prophet ﷺ in majalis, in front of his companions, sometimes even teaching people, he was reclining. So it's not aib. You know what I mean? Sometimes we have this idea that, look at that person, he's teaching and he's leaning on something, or he's teaching and reclining against something, or that's not aib. The Prophet ﷺ, he has the best character. His character is better than mine, his character is better than yours. And if he ﷺ, while teaching, while being amongst his companions, is reclining, then for us to recline is not a problem at all. And sometimes you can do it, it's not something you should do always, but if you're feeling tired and you want to rest against something while you're talking or in a gathering, it's totally fine. The Prophet ﷺ himself, he did it. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. The next hadith, عن عبد الرحمن بن أبي بكرة عن أبيه قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Very powerful hadith. This is usually the hadith that's mentioned in the books where it talks about the major sins. He says, ألا أحدثكم بأكبر الكبائر. Should I not tell you of one of the most, of the gravest of the major sins? The gravest of the major sins. أكبر الكبائر. The Prophet ﷺ, he says things in a way where it captures the people's attention. He says, ألا أحدثكم بأكبر الكبائر. And so everyone gets, they pay attention. They said, قالوا بلى يا رسول الله. Of course, يا رسول الله. The Prophet ﷺ, he tells them, الإشراك بالله وعقوق الوالدين. He says, associating partners with Allah, shirk, and disobeying and being, disobedience and disrespecting one's parents. And we know this has been talked and discussed many, many times, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whenever mentioning His own rights, who does He mention right after? The parents. It's all throughout the Quran. وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا وَاعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَلَا تُشْرِكُوا بِهِ شَيْئًا وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا. So many times in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the rights of the parents. And this does not just mean parents, but also means grandparents. This also means great-grandparents if you have them alive as well. And so he says, Al-Ishraq billah wa uquq al-walidayn. And the Prophet ﷺ, while he was saying that, he was reclining against something. He was saying this whilst reclining against something like this. So what does that mean? Is it permissible for someone to teach and talk in a gathering whilst they're reclining? Yes, of course. The Prophet ﷺ, he did it. Right? And so, قال وجلس رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وكان متكئا. And then, so he said, ألا أحدثكم بأكبر الكبائر الإشراك بالله وعقوق الوالدين. And then he got up. What does it mean that he got up? That he's about to say something very serious, right? Something even more serious that should capture your attention even more. The Prophet ﷺ, he got up out of his state of relaxation, and then he said, وَشَهَادَةُ الزُّورِ. Or there's shak between the rawi, or قَوْلُ الزُّورِ. شَهَادَةُ الزُّورِ or قَوْلُ الزُّورِ, bearing false witness. And you would assume that ishraq, shirk, associating partners with Allah, is far, far worse than bearing false witness. But the reality is, when a person does shirk, it's most likely that he's only harming himself. But when you start causing fasad in a community, when you start spreading lies, and you start causing hatred between people and jealousy between people because of your tongue and because of what you're saying, you're causing not just yourself, you're not just harming yourself, but you're harming everyone around you. Yeah. So the Prophet ﷺ, he kept repeating it. قال فما زال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقولها وشهادة الزور قول الزور وشهادة الزور قول الزور هكذا, until the Sahaba, they said حتى قلنا ليته سكت رسول الله. What they mean by that is we wish that the Prophet ﷺ would stop, would stay silent, because they found that the Prophet ﷺ, he got up out of his relaxed state and he was getting very intense, and they wanted, out of shafaqa and love for the Prophet ﷺ, they didn't want to see him in that state. They didn't want to see him in that intense, in that intense state. The next hadith, عن أبي جحيفة قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أما أنا فلا آكل متكئا. In this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, as for me, I do not eat whilst reclining. I do not eat food whilst reclining. And does this mean that this is only specifically to the Prophet ﷺ because he said, Amma ana? No, this is for everyone. And so the ulama, when they give the hukum, what's the hukum? Can anybody guess? Of eating whilst reclining. Is it haram? Makruh. The ulama, they say it's makruh, disliked to eat whilst reclining. Reclining doesn't mean, if I'm sitting on a chair, I'm invited to a gathering and I'm sitting on a chair like this and my back is against it. No, it's like, if you're on a couch and you're lying down and you're eating food. That's not how a person should eat. That's not the haiba of how a person should eat. The Prophet ﷺ, in all of his affairs, he was humble. He said in a hadith, إِنَّمَا أَجْلِسُ كَمَا يَجْلِسُ الْعَبْدُ وَآكُلُ كَمَا يَأْكُلُ الْعَبْدُ. He said, I sit the way a servant sits and I eat the way a servant eats. So out of kibr is when a person leans back, relaxes, and he's starting to eat till his absolute fill. Maybe some people, they watch TV binging 30 minutes, they're eating. They don't know when the food is going to finish. They're just eating and relaxing and reclining. And mashallah, they're building these rolls. There's rolls over here, and rolls over here, and rolls over here. That's not how a person should live. They should eat, like the Prophet ﷺ ate, and they should sit the way the Prophet ﷺ sat when he ate. And then the last two hadith, I believe, are repeating what we covered. قال سمعت أبا جحيفة يقول قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا آكل متكئا. I don't eat whilst reclining. In the last hadith, عن جابر, in another with another chain. رأيت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم متكئا على وسادة. I saw him reclining against a cushion, and in this riwayah he doesn't mention on the left side. I have a question for you. When you eat food, can you recline? It's makruh, it's disliked. Can you stand and eat?
Can you stand and eat?
Yeah. What's the hukm? Huh?
No.
Can you stand and drink?
Can you stand and drink?
ليش من السنة أنت تشرب
من
I guess you
السنة?
can stand and drink.
Huh?
I guess you can stand and drink, but eat and stand and eat, that's no.
Okay, so what's better is that if you have the opportunity to sit and drink, you sit and drink.
Right.
What's better is that if you have chairs around you and you can sit and eat,
Right.
it's better that you sit and eat. But for example, there's a water fountain. You're going to go put some water in your mouth and sit and pour in a cup and drink it. Sit down. No, you're going to drink it standing up because that's how the water fountain is built.
Right.
So it's khilaf awla. It's better that you sit and do these things. But if you are standing and eating or standing and drinking, that doesn't mean it's haram. Some of the scholars don't even say that it's makruh. They say it's khilaf awla. It's better to do it whilst sitting, and it's better to eat whilst sitting. And what I want to get across also is that sometimes we see people in our day-to-day lives perhaps standing and eating or standing and drinking, and sometimes someone who thinks they know it all, they'll be like, Shaykh, you have to sit. The sunnah is sitting.
Right.
You have to sit and drink. You have to sit and that's not adab. That when someone is in a public gathering and then you tell them, you have to sit and do it. You have to sit and do it. Who are you to tell them what to do and what not to do when there's aslan, it's not even makruh by some of the scholars' opinions. Forget, let alone it being haram and there's disagreement. And they're not even saying it's makruh. So how are you to come here and tell them you should sit? Unless you're doing it min bab al-ta'aleem, you want to say, what's the discussion on it? That's different. But to come and order people around and sit on this high horse and think you know the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal and your way is superior, that's not how you should act with your brothers and sisters of Islam. Rather, you should be someone who is humble. That if you see someone standing and sitting, or standing and drinking, or standing and eating, don't be so nitpicky on these small issues. Later, when they're not standing, when they're not, then maybe you could talk to them about it. Be like, it might be better. Have a discussion with them about it. But to come and act like you're the boss, that's not how you should treat your Muslim brothers, and that's not the way of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala an yarzuqna jami'an al-akhlaq al-muhammadiyya. صلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه.